walking down the deserted hall of F-Wing when all of a sudden she was bombarded with all of her students, past and present, filled with questions. She became so overwhelmed that she fainted. She was awoken in her classroom by the sound of vigorous pen scratches made by the one and only William Shakespeare. Joy filled her as her eyes fell upon her idol.
"Give me your hand if we be friends, and cometh with thyself on a journey through hell,"
he said quite dramatically.
Oh my God, Shakespeare, I'm your #1 fan. I've seen all your plays.
Miss Perry said with excitement.
"It always fills me with glee to meet a fan, but now is not the time. Let's get down to business."
Through the dungeon they went until they reached the door to the teacher's lounge. But inside was not the teacher's lounge. Mrs. Perry gazed at the thousands of sinners waiting to hear their punishments.
"What fools these mortals be,"
remarked Shakespeare as he shook his head in shame, and they continued on and entered the first level.
"This is the level of sass,"
Shakespeare stated.
Wait, isn't this supposed to be limbo? And isn't that my old student Dill?
"No,
He cut her off.
'tis the level of sass, and because this young lad spent his days spreading sass to others, whether they desired it or not, his mouth will be eternally covered with duct tape, so he can spreadeth his sass no more."
Deeper they went into the pits of hell, the air growing denser. In the distance they heard a smacking sound. Once they were close enough, they could see it, a giant floating golf club swinging at a golf ball. But upon closer inspection, Mrs. Perry noticed something off about it.
That's a head.
She exclaimed.
"'Tis true. 'Tis the head of the infamous golfer, Tiger Woods. This, the level of lust, contains adulterers, such as he. Frailty, thy name is Tiger. For the rest of his days, his head will serve as the ball that brought him fame and murdered his marriage."
As they continued deeper into the inferno, they were enticed by a sweet aroma. As they continued to walk, Mrs. Perry's steady stride became a struggle.
What is this? And why does it smell so good?
She asked.
Shakespeare replied, "We have entered the level of the gluttonous. Feast your eyes upon Paula Dean. She has sinned by using twice the butter that any recipe calleth for. Because of this crime, she now sits and wallows in a tub of all the unnecessary butter."
Mrs. Perry watched Paula Dean with pity. Further down, they went until suddenly something flew into Mrs. Perry's face, temporarily blinding her. She yelled.
What's happening? What's on me? And why is it furry?
Shakespeare calmly removed the fur from her face.
"'Tis only the hairpiece of Donald Trump."
Why is it here? And is the rest of him here too?
"Indeed, for this is the level of greed. These people were controlled by money through life and are now punished by having their prized purchases out to reach forever. Witness as Donald Trump, the greediest of all, attempts to regain both his toupee and his dignity, as this wind blows it away, and presently let the wind carry us away."
The winds proceeded to sweep them away, further and further, until they reached the level of wrath.
"Here is Kanye West with some exciting news to share,"
What is it?
pondered Mrs. Perry.
"No one is quite sure. Let us watch."
Kanye opened his mouth.
Yo, guys, you won't believe what just happened to me.
Another interrupted. Wait, I'm gonna let you finish, but I gotta tell you about the most exciting thing that just happened to me. I found a penny on the ground and it was heads up, yo.
But guys, I just want...
I'm gonna let you finish, but it was an unending cycle,
Guys!
yelled Kanye in anger.
"I shall let you finish,
Interrupted Shakespeare.
but we have much more to explore with.
In anger, Kanye bit his thumb at them, and
Here
on they
we enter
went.
the level of the heretics. These people were unable to conform to society and life. For going against all ways, Lady Gaga is forced to dress in the drabbest clothing anyone could imagine. Watch as she weeps."
Oh, poor thing.
Mrs. Perry said, reaching for her, only to be stopped by her guide.
"Dispute with her not. She is lunatic."
And so, Shakespeare continued to lead Mrs. Perry down, down, down.
I do not want to go any further. It is all too much for me to bear.
"The lady doth protest too much, methinks."
He said, handing her an umbrella.
What is this for?
She asked. Her question was answered moments later as the umbrella was pelted with eggs.
What is happening?
She screamed.
"We have arrived at the level of the violent. Here is Justin Bieber. With his foolish prank, he committed violence against properties. In return, he is the one to be egged."
And he stood, dripping with egg yolks and flipping white eggshells out of his hair. Moved along, Shakespeare explained.
"This be the level of the fraudulent. Casteth your gaze to the right, and you will see the seducers, flatterers, and hypocrites. To the left, the thieves, fortune-tellers, and falsifiers.
Mrs. Perry pointed.
Who is that man with his face in his phone?
Shakespeare replied with disgust.
This rat, Perez Hilton, is one of the cruelest sowers of discord. For all the pain he has caused with his gossip of others in life, he must now treateth the most embarrassing of truths with himself as the subject.
Suddenly, Mrs. Perry's phone buzzed, announcing a new tweet.
Paris Hilton wet the bed until he was 14.
She read out loud. As the pair walked away, they could hear Perez's faint cries of humiliation. Their journey carried on. The horrors had been immense so far.
This is terrible. Is this really hell? Could even eternal damnation be this horrid?
Mrs. Perry cried out.
There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Now we arrive at the final level of the inferno, the level of the treacherous. Here lies Kristen, Annabelle, and Alondra.
But those are my favorite students. How could they possibly be here?
For betraying their teacher and refusing to do their Dante Project, the girls had been sent down to the lowest level of hell, forbidden from ever returning to their humanities class. Here, they weep forever. Mrs. Perry felt her heart ache with sorrow, but also disappointment in her students.
To be pitiful or not to be?
She recited.
I'm impressed. You really do know your stuff.
And so they left the weeping trio. They walked along until Shakespeare turned to Mrs. Perry.
'Tis time for our journey to come to an end.
No, don't go. Why must we finish here when I have learned so much from you?
Yes, parting is such sweet sorrow.
Shakespeare said.
But, my dear friend, I have one more lesson. To thine own self be true, and thou canst not be then false to any man.
The end.